Today, our lesson will come from Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woods. All you need is a sheet of notebook paper and a pencil or pen to take notes and record your thinking. Let's start by looking at this book trailer to get a little bit more information about the book. Let's talk a little bit more about the genre of this text. So if you take a look, it says first person point of view and voice. Memoirs are autobiographical because the writer tells his or her own story. Memoir writers almost always use first person point of view, referring to themselves with the first person pronouns, such as I, me, and mine. First person point of view has specific effects. The reader sees through the author's eyes. The thoughts and feelings of others in the story remain hidden. First person narration may also make the writer's voice obvious. Voice is the way a writer sounds on the page. It's a sense the reader gets of a real person behind the words. The writer's attitude and word choices create his or her unique voice. Take a look at the tip. In first person narratives, the narrator is part of the story. With other points of view, the narrator tells the story but isn't part of it. So, the important thing to understand here is that in a memoir, the first person point of view directly affects your relationship with the narrator. It allows the narrator to tell you his or her thoughts and feelings in his or her own voice. You grow to understand a narrator's personality. Let's take a look at the example sentences you see here. We see the narrator of a memoir is the writer is the main character telling about his or her own life. For example, the morning before our vacation, I got a horrible summer cold. Also, the writer provides an inside look at his or her thoughts and feelings. I felt my face grow hot and red with embarrassment. And the last thing is that a writer's attitude and word choice creates a unique voice. For example, I was content to be idle under the shade of the apple tree and was happy as the grass was green. Take a look at the third sentence. Look at the words content, idle, and happy. They definitely convey a dreamy voice. On your sheet of notebook paper, I'd like you to take a minute to write an original sentence that conveys a unique voice. Think about how word choice and attitude, such as you're quite welcome versus sure thing, convey voice. Take a minute and write your original sentence now. Now let's take a look at these practice items. At your tables, I want you to read each item and determine whether it's written in first person point of view, and then mark your answers. Now let's take a look at this practice. Now let's take a look at this practice section. I want you to read each item and determine whether it is written in the first person. On your sheet of paper, just put point of view, numbers 1, 2, and 3, and you're just going to write yes or no for each one. Take a minute to read each one and decide for yourselves, and then we'll turn and talk. Okay, now turn to your partner and tell them what you put for each answer. Before we read this selection, I'd like you to learn a little bit about the author, Jacqueline Woodson.
The work I do is considered young people's literature, but I like to think it's for all people who are curious and thinking about the world and thinking about how they can have an impact on it. My name is Jacqueline Woodson, and I'm a writer. I love writing. I've always loved writing. I write because I have questions, and I write because I have thoughts I want to express. And I think if I do it well enough, if the reader falls in love with the story or with the characters, they're going to come away from that book thinking about things differently. I write books that I hope young people can see themselves inside of and see their experiences inside of. And if they can't, hopefully they'll see other experiences. And when you see other people on the page and when you learn their stories, you gain empathy, you gain an understanding, and your world becomes bigger and better.
Okay, so now here we see, like we talked about, we are going to be reading a memoir. Now, in a memoir, a writer tells a true story from a specific period in his or her own life. The writer's story is true, or true as the writer remembers it, but it may be told in an artistic way that uses elements of short stories or in poems. The selection you are about to read is an excerpt from a memoir. So she wrote the big book from Brown Girl Dreaming, and we are going to be reading a selection of poems from that book. Now, the author's purpose in a memoir is to share memories from their life. When we look at the characteristics, like we said, it is going to be written in first person point of view. It's going to present a strong example of the writer's distinct sound, meaning their voice. It's going to express a controlling idea about an event in the writer's life. It's going to have characters, although the characters are real people, and it takes place in a certain setting or a time and place. Usually, most memoirs are written as prose, meaning they're written as a story in paragraphs. It seems like a short story. It could be broken into chapters or even sections, but it does tend to tell the life events in time order, in sequential order. So, a memoir is based on the author's memory. Now, it might not always be accurate, but the main difference between an autobiography and a memoir is that an autobiography covers the entire life, but a memoir tends to focus on a set of events or a certain time period in the author's life. I want you now on your sheet of paper to go ahead and write some similarities between memoirs and narratives. What's the same about a memoir and a narrative? Remember narratives like we tell a story. Go ahead and write that down on your paper. Now I'd like you to turn and talk about the ideas you came up with about the ways that a memoir and a narrative are the same. Okay. Hopefully, in your groups, you talked about how both present events in the order in which they happened, meaning both are in chronological order.
From Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. Memoir in verse. Background. As a child in the 1960s, Jacqueline Woodson moved with her family from Greenville, South Carolina, to Brooklyn in New York City. Her memoir, Brown Girl Dreaming, tells of her childhood experiences growing up in both places. In a memoir, an author recalls important events in his or her life. Brown Girl Dreaming is unique as a memoir because it is written in verse, or as poetry. About the author. Jacqueline Woodson, born 1964, was born in Columbus, Ohio. She recalls being happiest as a child when she was writing. I wrote on paper bags and my shoes and denim binders. A 2008 Newbery Honor winner, Woodson believes that writers need to be honest and to listen to the voices of young people. From Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. Brooklyn rain. The rain here is different than the way it rains in Greenville. No sweet smell of honeysuckle, no soft squish of pine, no slip and slide through grass. Just Mama saying, "Stay inside today, it's raining," and me at the window. Nothing to do but watch the gray sidewalk grow darker, watch the drops slide down the glass pane, watch people below me move fast, heads bent. Already there are stories in my head, already color and sound and words. Already I'm drawing circles on the grass, humming myself someplace far away from here. Down south, there was always someplace else to go. You could step out into the rain and Grandma would let you lift your head and stick out your tongue. Be happy. Down south already feels like a long time ago, but the stories in my head take me back there, set me down in Daddy's garden where the sun is always shining.
Okay. Remember that a memoir is based on the writer's memories of a certain time in his or her life. The author's personal thoughts and feelings shape how the events are related and give the memory a distinct voice. I want you to take a look at this poem a second time. On your sheet of notebook paper, please write Brooklyn Rain, and we're going to record some thinking about this poem. First of all, I'd like you to write down, what is the author comparing? Now, of the two things that she's comparing, which does she prefer? And why? So you're writing down which she prefers and why. I want you to notice that in comparing her city life to Greenville, Woodson is revealing to us that city life is new for her, and that in the city, she has to stay inside on a rainy day. Take a look at some of her character traits. We notice that she's bored inside. She uses her imagination to create stories in her head. I want you to use what the author tells you to describe her feelings. How does she feel now in this new place? What could make her happier? What inferences can you make about her personality? Go ahead and record some character traits that you have for her now.
Another way. While our friends are watching TV or playing outside, we are in our house, knowing that begging our mother to turn the television on is useless. Begging her for 10 minutes outside will only mean her saying no. Saying, "You can run wild with your friends anytime. Today, I want you to find another way to play." And then one day, my mother comes home with 2 shopping bags filled with board games. Monopoly, checkers, chess, ants in the pants, sorry, trouble. Just about every game we've ever seen in the commercials between our Saturday morning cartoons. So many games, we don't know where to begin playing, so we let Roman choose. And he chooses trouble, because he likes the sound the die makes when it pops inside its plastic bubble. And for days and days, it is Christmas in November. Games to play when our homework is done, Monopoly money to count, and checkers to slam down on boards, ants to flip into blue plastic pants, chess pieces to practice moving until we understand their power. And when we don't, Roman and I argue that there's another way to play, called our way. But Hope and Dell tell us that we're too immature to even begin to understand, then bend over the chessboard in silence, each becoming the next chess champ of the house, depending on the day and the way the game is played. Sometimes Roman and I leave Hope and Dell alone to go to another corner of the room and become what the others call us, the 2 youngest, playing games we know the rules to, tic-tac-toe and checkers, hangman and connect the dots. But mostly, we lean over their shoulders as quietly as we can, watching, waiting, wanting to understand how to play another way.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this poem now for a minute. I'd like you to write Another Way, the title of this poem, on your notebook paper. For this poem, we're going to focus on visualizing. Creating mental images as you read helps you deepen your understanding of a text. You can use all of your senses to form a picture of what an author describes. Take a look at the first 3 stanzas of Another Way. Then I want you to describe the mental image that you create as you read this. Picture yourself in Woodson's place. Notice the details like the month of November. Think about what you know about November. Now, the best way to form a mental image is to put yourself in the story. So how would you feel if someone came home with 2 bags filled with board games? After homework was done, what sights and sounds might you see and hear? What type of mood would the scene have? Go ahead and spend a minute rereading the first 3 stanzas and writing down to describe the mental image you have as you read this section.
Gifted. Everyone knows my sister is brilliant. The letters come home folded neatly inside official-looking envelopes that my sister proudly hands over to my mother. Adela has achieved. Adela has excelled at. Adela has been recommended to. Adela's outstanding performance in. She is gifted, we are told, and I imagine presents surrounding her. I am not gifted. When I read, the words twist, twirl across the page. When they settle, it is too late. The class has already moved on. I want to catch words one day. I want to hold them, then blow gently. Watch them float right out of my hands.
Okay, let's take a look at the close reading directions. It says annotate. In Gifted, mark the words that are repeated in lines 5 through 7. So as we look at these lines, we see the repeated words, Odella has. The question says, why has the poet chosen to repeat these words? So as I reread the first stanza at Gifted, I notice and highlight those repetition of the words Odella has. I'm noticing that the author finishes the phrase with some sort of accomplishment, for example, achieved and excelled at. The words are repeated to draw attention to what Odell has done. Now, the last part of the close reading says, conclude. What effect does this repetition have on the reader? So I think the repetition is rhythmic. It sounds as if the author is repeating what she has heard, just as a child would mimic someone in a mocking voice. The effect of the repetition is to kind of reinforce the idea that the author's sister is brilliant and that her achievements overshadow anything the author has done. It kind of makes me feel a little bit sad for the author, thinking that Odella gets all the attention for her giftedness and she feels a little neglected.
Uncle Robert. Uncle Robert has moved to New York City. I hear him taking the stairs 2 at a time, and then he is at our door, knocking loud until our mother opens it, curlers in her hair, robe pulled closed, whispering, "It's almost midnight. Don't you wake my children." But we are already awake, all 4 of us, smiling and jumping around my uncle. "What'd you bring me?" Our mama shushes us, says, "It's too late for presents and the like, but we want presents and the like." And she, too, is smiling now, happy to see her baby brother who lives all the way over in far Rockaway, where the ocean is right there if you look out your window. Robert opens his hand to reveal a pair of silver earrings, says to my sister, "This is a gift for how smart you are. I want to be smart like Dell. I want someone to hand me silver and gold just because my brain clicks into thinking whenever it needs to, but I'm not smart like Dell, so I watch her press the silver moons into her ears. I say, I know a girl 10 times smarter than her. She gets diamonds every time she gets 100 on a test." And Robert looks at me, his dark eyes smiling, asks, "Is that something you made up, or something real?" In my own head, it's real as anything. In my head, all kinds of people are doing all kinds of things. I want to tell him this, that The world we're living in right here in Brownsville isn't the only place. But now my brothers are asking, "What'd you bring me?" And my uncle is pulling gifts from his pockets, from his leather briefcase, from inside his socks.
Let's look at the close reading directions here. It says annotate. Mark details in lines 15 through 23 of Uncle Robert that show what the poet is thinking. So if we look here, I'm seeing these lines. As I read lines 15 through 23, I notice and highlight what the speaker says she wants. I want to believe as I read lines 15 to as I read lines 15 to oh my gosh. As I read lines 15 through 23, I notice and highlight what the speaker says she wants, what she believes about herself, and what she says to her uncle. The question says, why might the poet have included these details? I notice that the poet admits that she wishes she would get attention for being smart, as her sister does, but she doesn't believe that she is smart. Also, she wants to point out to her uncle that there are other people smarter than her sister. This tells me that she is jealous of her sister and insecure about her own intelligence. The question at the bottom says, what do these details suggest about the poet's character? The details show me that the speaker believes her life would be better if she were smart like Dell, and explain part of her motivation to cope by making up stories.
He hands my mother a record, a small 45. James Brown, who none of us like because he screams when he sings. But my mother puts it on the record player, turned way down low, and then even us kids are dancing around. Robert's showing us the steps he learned at the Far Rockaway parties. His feet are magic, and we all try to slide across the floor like he does, our own feet, again and again, betraying us. "Teach us, Robert," we keep saying. "Teach us."
I'm so confused here. It's not right.